All right. Hi, Eric. Thank you so much for being here today. I'm excited to speak to you. You've been a friend of mine for many years now. I've always admired you as a marketer, as a brand builder, as a technologist, and I've had the opportunity many times to hear some of your outstanding insights. And it's just a great opportunity to have a moment to sit down and go deeper and kind of dig deep into your story and the things you've seen and what you've learned. As you know, we at A Teams are here to establish and empower the category of some of the top tech professionals that choose to be independent, to pursue their craft with autonomy, to work with the people they care about on the things that they like and on their own terms. So, as part of that, we kicked off this series called The Modern Independent, where we interview outstanding individuals like yourself to try to learn more about their stories, get some inspiration, the ideas that drove you, the things that you've learned along the way that could save time or empower other people. So thank you for doing this with us. How are you doing, Eric?
Good. Excited to be here.
Okay, wonderful. All right, so let's jump right in. So, what would you say is your craft today?
That's a great question. So, like a superpower or what my focus is, if
Yeah.
if I narrowed it down, the things that excite me are in the area of marketing, growth, and product, because I think, especially in a modern and a digital world, let alone a remote world, all of those play into each other. The best marketing is an incredible product. You can't just have an incredible product without a great story, and you always got to keep growing. So all of those play into each other, and yeah, it's good to have someone that can sit in the middle of all of those and understand all of those to kind of build your strategy.
All right, so really cool. So you've had experience. You have a wide gamut of experiences, if I recall. You've worked at the big name brands. You worked in tech, outside of tech. You've got a startups, a large companies. When did this all start? Like when was the click of like, oh, that's what I like to do. Like that's what I want to be doing. Can you bring us back to the beginning of like Eric 1.0, kind of coming out of his shell and starting to work on this stuff and be interested in that field?
Yeah, so I was born February 7th, 1989. It was a windy Tuesday. No kidding. When I was young, all jokes aside, when I was young, my mom was a tech analyst. She worked at Morgan Stanley, um, and she was part of the team that took Apple public. So I think she was 25, Steve Jobs was 23. The Scully guy was there fighting with Steve Jobs outside. And as part of that, being in the tech sector, as they called it back then, she used to bring home all of these little gadgets or books from the companies. So Sun Microsystems with Vinod Khosla, Eric Schmidt, the Motorola Razors, the first USB key from Dell, which we thought was a keychain. And then we broke it and then saw that it could go in the computer. And so from a young age, I was obsessed with everything she would bring home and just the idea of technology, or electronics, as they called it back then. And so, yeah, consumer tech has always been a passion. I think when you design something physical and something that people could use, Steve Jobs called it the bicycle for the mind. I think, yeah, it just enables you to live a better life. So from that age, I was obsessed with it. And I think whether I went to college or when I got to New York after, always sought out these communities, just like A Team, that brought those types of people working on consumer tech together. And whether I knew it or not, the subconscious decisions I've made in my career or what projects I work on or what people has always kind of been driven by that passion.
That's great. So you started your life kind of looking at electronics and developing that passion. How was the process to actually get to do this for work and kind of get paid for it?
Yeah. So that's a longer route, of course. There's that Japanese idea of ikigai, which is what a perfect life should be, which is like four Venn diagrams of something you love, something you're good at, something you can make money at, and something that helps the world. And it's really hard to find that, right? So to find something that you love doing and make money on it has been a longer road. I don't think it's ever a straight shot. But I would say my family, my parents pushed me into being an investment banker because they're like, you can make money doing that. So you're going to go to Wharton Business School you're going to take finance and accounting courses. You're going to come out and you're going to be a banker. And so I was like, yeah, like run the rat wheel. I'll do what, I'm told. Went to Wharton, hated finance classes almost as much as my finance professors hated me. Accounting was even worse. I just stopped going to that class. And instead of going to those classes, I would audit classes in the engineering. So there was industrial design, there was mechanical engineering, there was app building, which in 2007, not to date myself, was like, there was only one course on it. At the same time, the Warby Parker guys were doing entrepreneurship in the MBA program, pitching their eyeglass startup that no one really took seriously at first. So there were seeds there where I lit up in the engineering school classes. I lit up in the MBA classes I audited, hearing people talk about business.
Okay, so that's actually fascinating, that time where going into tech was not the thing that it is today. I remember it very clearly for myself as well, where being an entrepreneur was pretty much the same thing as being unemployed. And that's the last thing that my parents wanted for me.
Yeah.
That's the last thing that was like, I remember growing up in France, they would, tell you that the best thing you can aspire to, if you like those computers, is to be an engineer at a really, really big telco. And you would be so happy to get into those jobs. So I think I can absolutely relate to that kind of mismatch between the passion that you have and the way society and education and structure pointing you to. So then you graduate from school, you've got this fancy degree, you've got to justify pouring so much money into it. What happens next?
Yes, so that's also an interesting story. I graduated college without a job, which was my Jewish mother was not happy about, and neither was the school, because they had selected me unbeknownst to my lack of career ambitions at the time as the student graduation speaker. And when writing the introductions, they're like, "Oh, we seem to miss where you're going to work." And I'm like, "Oh, yeah, I don't have a job yet." And they flipped out, but it was the day before, so there was nothing they could do, which should have been a sign. But anyway, I graduated school without a job. I started doing light freelance projects. I would help, based on what I learned, build websites for people, set up their social media, because that wasn't even an industry yet. There were no consultants doing it. They were like, "You're a child, set up our Facebook and Instagram accounts and ad accounts." So I did that for a few months. And one of the people I was helping was, she became the CMO of Michael Kors, the chief marketing officer. And she was like, "Come work for me." And I'm like,
Whoa.
In fashion? And like, "Yeah, just come work for me. I'll pay you more than you're making now. I'll pay you more than, a normal salary for someone your age. I just really need help. I'm going into this company. They're private. They're going to be public soon. They need all new web stuff. They need all new social media and digital marketing. I don't even know where to start. Just come in and do it." So
Oh my God.
So I was like,
how old were you at the time?
"What?" I was 20 years old.
Amazing.
So they're like, "Come in." And they're like, "And we also want you to meet the CEO of Michael Kors." So I didn't know. I didn't even think fashion companies would talk to me. I didn't really have a sense of fashion or culture, any of that stuff. I liked the Beatles for music, but that was the only culture I had. So I went in a 3-piece suit, extremely overdressed, to meet with this CEO. And I looked like grown up in a child's body. So anyway, that meeting ended up going super well, because they needed a lot of help. He needed a lot of help with the presentations and decks for their roadshow and investors. They were going public. So I kind of had a dual role where I worked for her as under the digital strategist, just one digital strategist. It was a company of 300 people. And I worked for him doing all internal and external presentations. That was day one. I ended up staying 7 years, from when they went from 300 people to 13,000 people, and from a few $100 million to over $5 billion in revenue. And there's a lot of, I basically grew up at that company over the 7 years.
I think I had the chance to meet you towards the end of your time at Michael Kors, and I remember you were doing some pretty amazing projects. Is there something you can talk about?
Yeah, I mean, all of it's public now. Well, most of it. So by the time I left, I had grown from the digital strategist. I hired our director of social media. I hired a brand technology team. I was managing our product managers. So for all apps inside our stores for 9,000 associates, and then apps for our consumers, millions of consumers around the world. We had over 2,500 locations, and I think it was offices in 21 countries, operational in 60 plus countries, if not more. So I did the product management team. I did all digital innovation. So anything that touched our e-commerce site, which did a few hundred million a year, anything that touched our operations and sales teams, anything that touched licensing, retail, marketing, creative, any startup that wanted to do business with Michael Kors came through my team. And then anything in the areas of wearables. So we did a partnership with Google on their Android OS, which became Wear OS smartwatch. And at the time, it was shitty Motorola and Samsung designs. And we were the first fashion one they did. And we ended up publicly, I can say, selling over $200 million in the first year. And we're the number one selling smartwatch that wasn't an Apple Watch.
Wow.
So the number one selling Google smartwatch.
At some point, after 7 years, this incredible arc, you leave. Why?
Yeah, so I got bored. I called it a velvet prison. It was the best job in the world, flying around on private jets, working with global teams, getting to travel. As before graduating college, before the middle of college, I had never been on a plane. I never traveled. So this job got me to see the entire world. I learned everything about social media, digital media, growth, e-commerce, direct to consumer, apps, everything I learned on that job. But it came to a point where you then built a team, you've seen the company grow, you've learned everything you can about a business. And I think it's just human nature. If you were doing anything for 7 years, you'd want to change. And so I did the number one thing a millennial shouldn't do when going to talk to a baby boomer CEO. And I walked into his office, thanked him for everything, and said, I think my time here is done. And he asked, well, what are you going to go do? And I said, I'm going to go travel and find myself. And he said, you are pardon my language, a fucking idiot if you do that. Get a job and then travel. So he's like, I'm not going to let you leave. I'll give you sabbatical. Take all the time you need. When you find a job that you think is good enough, you'll bring it to me. I'll give you feedback. If I think it's good enough, you can leave. So they were super, super generous with that. I had searched. I had looked at big tech companies like Facebook and Google. I had looked at some of the startups I had worked with that had become middle-sized companies. I had looked at a bunch of the agencies. I worked with over 100 agencies, from the big creative ones like RGA, Razorfish, Sapient Nitro, to small creative shops like Gin Lane, et cetera. And I couldn't really have found something that was a fit because I had never really taken the time to say, what do I want and what kind of culture and what kind of projects and what kind of work-life balance. And that's why it's a velvet prison. You get paid really well. You get to travel. You get to meet interesting people who want to meet with you because you're at a big fish, at a big company. And so it turns out that they had invested, the investors of Michael Kors had invested in a wearable tech startup that combined fashion and technology in a way that once I heard the idea, I was obsessed. And they ended up offering me to be their third co-founder, the CMO, and the head of product. And so that was a job that I deemed good enough. And so I finally made the jump to go from a 13,000 person company to a 20 person company.
Wow. And that was, how was that like?
That was, it was a company called Token. It is, or was, a wearable ring that scans your fingerprint, and it's stored on a secure element. Your credit card, your house keys, your car keys, your browser passwords, computer passwords, and it used Bluetooth and NFC. So kind of like think Apple Pay in a ring, but for everything, which is the direction, by the way, Apple Watches, Google, Apple phones are all moving. The idea that your identity credentials, what you use, the keys that you use to unlock things, the digital keys that you use to identify yourself, the digital keys that you use to access your money and send money, all of those can be used immediately if you authenticate in the right way. And instead of a password, this time we used your fingerprint.
That's beautiful, because when you tell that story, it reminds me of the beginning of what you said, where you were growing up and looking at his electronics and the first USB disc, the USB stick, and all this stuff, and it feels like you actually got to be a part of the new generation of that.
So yeah, it was a no-brainer to go there and to get the chance to own physical product, because even with the Michael Kors one, obviously Google owned product and Fossil owned design, and we owned brand and app and marketing. But to be able to have that all in one place, you could think about the customer when you were designing the product and think about the campaign you wanted to tell. You knew every detail about what decisions were being made and why. You knew how that would position your product versus competitive experiences or alternative use cases. And yeah, it was amazing. Waking up every day, I had never been more excited to go to work.
So, what drives you today? Did you find what you were looking for after all the travels and those experiences?
Well, so the one thing I'll say, the other benefit was this was the first startup I joined, and everything that could have gone wrong went wrong. And I won't go into the details because not a lot of it's public, but it involves certain public lawsuits. It involves running out of funding. It involves delays, constant delays in hardware. It involved, co-founder relationships that impacted the company. And so what I'll say is this, because I was shattered. Like, that was my first company doing that. And I had made every mistake in the book that you could make. I had joined the company after 2 weeks of meeting them and just dove in. And I think looking back on it, I'm so grateful to have those lessons earlier in my career, or what I hope is early. Because one, you should be obsessed with your work, but you should be obsessed with the inputs, not the outputs. And what I mean by that is you shouldn't tie yourself to the success of a brand name or a company, but you should tie yourself to the skills that you contribute, the collaboration you foster, what kind of team member you are, because you're going to be serving on tons of teams in your life. And if you get obsessed with tying your name to a startup, then it creates a lot of anxiety, because even to the outside world, you rise and fall with your startup. I think it's extremely important to be committed, but I made that mistake. We made so many mistakes with hardware. We made mistakes with basic early stage startup planning, from risk mitigation to roadmap to engineer optimization to working on an MVP and not boiling the ocean. So long story short, that was a blessing, because after that, I wasn't turned off from startups. I ended up working for 2 VCs and being a operating partner and strategic advisor to both their portfolios of 30 plus companies, one in the crypto space, one in the retail tech space. And instead of learning from one company, I got to work with over 50 founders and founding teams on product growth, marketing, and I saw them making some of the same mistakes that I was making, so I was able to help them. And then I saw some of the challenges in mass that early stage startups create when you're building something from 0 to 1. And what you realize is there's a pattern of what an early stage company needs, from a great product, really clear role definition, really clear product definition, a great brand and a story, and a vision that is repeated over and over again. Speaking to customers early on the mom test. So I got to kind of work on their dime to learn even more about, building an early stage company, an early stage consumer tech company or a brand. And so that, again, was another incredible educational experience.
I really like the insight of the tie yourself to the inputs and not the outputs. I think it's a brilliant advice, actually. I think it took me forever to understand it. I'm not sure even I do today, but what I do know is that when there's so much we can't control, and there's anything that we learn in 2020 is that there's so much that we cannot control.
Nothing.
Nothing. We gotta put ourselves in a position, especially in creative work, where we can tell ourselves at least, okay, we've done our absolute best. And to be in that position, by the way, is a ton of work. But if you can put yourself in that position and then you embrace whatever happens, I think that's the best position to be. It's just amazing insight, Eric. Thank you for sharing that with us. So you got all that learnings. You burnt yourself through insane startup experience. I'm also curious, by the way, when a startup is on fire and so many problems and challenging, and talked about running out of funding even, which is kind of the scariest thing that can happen to a startup. Could you actually grow your skill set through that? Like, was that an opportunity that was positive ultimately for your professional growth, or
Yes,
was it not?
100%. I would say the first thing it teaches you, which I think is the most important lesson in startups, if not in life, one of them, not in life, because obviously you need love, but is the idea of ego death. Like when a startup is crashing and burning, if you have an ego, that dissipates because it can't help you. You can't save that. You also learn that like there's wartime CEOs and peacetime CEOs, or wartime founders and peacetime founders. Almost anyone could be a great peacetime founder, right? Money's coming in, the economy's good. If this doesn't work, I pivot. If this doesn't work, I pivot. And I don't mean to denigrate that kind of thing, but what makes startups that become great and change people's lives, or ultimately make it to their mission and vision of what they want, you have to go through a bunch of hardships. I say it's like chewing glass and getting punched in the face every day. Like you have to be used to investors being concerned. You have to be used to potentially wasting money on development or hardware or the wrong hire, or going in the wrong direction to find out from your analytics that that's not what customers want.
Sure.
I think
Yeah.
in that kind of experience, you learn two things from a postmortem: what you could have done the first time around, and certain activities that can triage and focus your company.
What's going on with you today?
Yeah. So after advising 60 plus companies, I wanted the ball. As Michael Jordan say, winners want the ball. I'm not a winner, but I wanted to play. And so I ended up signing on with my friend to specifically, well, so first I took a few board seats from those investors so I could be more active than just kind of giving daily advice, but latch onto the 3 or 4 companies I really liked. One is a reverse RFID platform that makes the Amazon Go style checkout experience and back of house experience for any retailer. Another one is a bundling solution for enterprise companies using blockchain to let them manage licenses. So for $12 a month, you get access to the New York Times, Wall Street Journal, Stratechery, the information, all these amazing things, and you get to manage that for your whole team. There's a few more, but I took board seats, which gave me a more active role, but wasn't active enough. So then I actually started doing product, brand marketing, performance marketing, and growth hacking consulting, where I picked a few companies that my friends were starting and just started helping them build their companies, raise seed funds, start building out their brand marketing, their brand story, their product roadmap and prototypes, their engineering roadmap, hiring teams like A-Teams, shout out, because you guys are absolutely killing it with one of our startups on the app.
That's amazing to hear. Thank you.
And so I started doing all of that for the past kind of 5 or 6 months, and I really enjoyed that.
So you don't have the big brand of Michael Kors on you right now, and you certainly don't have the private jet, as far as I know. You don't have the funded startup, CMO of a funded startup status as of right now. So you're Eric, and you're building Eric right now. So tell me, what's the best part about the past 6 months, and what's the most toughest situations? Love to learn from that experience.
Yeah, I'll start with the toughest situations. Going back to what you said about being an entrepreneur, I think as a freelancer, so to speak, my entire family thinks I'm unemployed, even though I'm making more money than I've made for the past several years in a given month. So yeah, they don't understand what I'm doing. They think it's not stable. They're always trying to send me job links. You should apply for this. And at a certain point, it's you stop trying to explain it. The other tough situation is you have to get very comfortable with what I said about the inputs than the outputs, because it's the same thing. People don't understand unless you're at a funded company or you're at a big brand name tech company or brand. They don't understand what you're doing, and you don't have a proxy for success. Even though you can be someone, a small cog in the wheel at one of those companies, people think you're successful because you have Google or Facebook or blank those out in the interview, but some big company name there. And so you don't have that proxy for success until you do. And so it's like an artist so to speak, painting on their own. You have to get really happy with, is my technique good? Am I creating good art every day? And that's really tough. I think one of the things that helps me, which leads into the best thing about working in a freelance kind of situation, is you can't reach the most beautiful places on earth with a direct flight. Like there's plenty of stopovers to get to like the best places. So if you want to be like everyone else and take the direct flights, you can go to the major cities. But if you want to go to Wanderlands remote, you got to kind of take a small plane here and a boat or ferry here. And that's kind of the thing that I've been realizing. Like there's so much I'm learning about different business models, hardware, manufacturing, brand design. I'm learning about the most talented people you've never heard of, that would never work at a single big company, but have quietly been doing brands or app work, or working for the likes of Steve Jobs and Apple, or Kanye West as a creative director, or building apps for Dyson, or supporting Apple with their car project. All of these people I would have never met unless I went into this freelancer community, which is like, how do we get shit done? How do we build shit? And who are the best people doing that? I think most people get a really good paycheck and have some idea directionally of where they're going, but finding true clarity, understanding and isolating exactly what your North Star is, unless you have a calling at a very young age, to which I hate those people and I'm super jealous, it's really hard to find that clarity. And it's not until the floor is pulled out from under you and no one's telling you, this is what you're working on this quarter, or this is the vision of this company, and you're playing a part in that. But to build that for yourself and say, this is my calling, or these are the types of things I want to work on, you can't do that until you sit in a room alone in the dark with yourself and say, okay, I can do anything in the world. What really, to answer your question in the beginning of this discussion, what really will bring me joy? What will bring other people joy? And what can I make a good living doing? And I think I'm getting closer to finding that.
The second point you said about finding clarity, you're right. Like it's obviously people think it's the disease of our generation. In a way, I think it's a disease of every generation. It's hard to find clarity when you have choice. The more choice you have, the harder it is to find clarity and have a clear roadmap. In a way, society have made it so that a lot of us have access to more freedom of choice. But when it's like when you're running your own company, the company is yourself, then you really have to figure out, you get to choose. And by making those decisions, you really build yourself. It's really fascinating stuff, Eric. But tell me more about being a marketer and kind of being behind those products. Can you really help from the outside? Like you're working with all this like really interesting people. They're great at what they do. You come in, you help those companies being founded and incubated, and you help with, say, marketing a product. Can you really be helpful? And if so, in what way have you found that it's creating the most value for those companies you're involved with?
Yeah, I mean, I have a lot different attitude now than when I was Michael Kors. At Michael Kors, I would say, even at Michael Kors, when we hired marketing agencies and creative agencies, some which were very expensive, but for good reason, some of the best creative talent in the world and teams that already work well together are there. But then a lot of times you do work and you're meeting with a consultant or a freelance team or a marketing team from the outside once a week. And I personally don't think that's enough. The way I've structured it, and the only way I would do this kind of work with a team, is if you build a very intimate relationship. So you know the founders, you can text them or call them whenever. You have full access to information. You're in the Slack, you get emails, you know everything going on. And yeah, I'm on the outside, but we're all working from home and remote right now. So I'm more active than some full-time employees.
That's amazing. You're getting all these very types of experiences. I can like imagine you level up with every one of these engagements. How do you see the future for Eric in the next like couple years? What does that look like?
Again, my Jewish mother would say married and with children. I don't know what that will fall, but to be honest, I don't know the full answer to that. Well, I can tell you why I feel more calm and zen and confident about the next few years is because once you realize that you can make a decent living, a really decent living, being a freelancer, working with companies that are not your own, you realize that you can build the work-life balance that you want. But more importantly, as you said, it's leveling up. It's like Mario hitting the little thing and the coin pops out, which is knowledge. You learn a little with each company, and so it's kind of like what when you watch a movie or you read a book, you pick it and you know you're going to get something out of it and you have an idea of what that is. When you work with a company, whether it's for a month, 3 months, 6 months, you kind of know what you'll get out of it. So curating these experiences and being lucky enough to learn from each one while getting paid and making a living lets me get closer to what my North Star is, which goes back to the very beginning, consumer tech. And I don't have to go the route of thinking of a world changing idea and raising all this money for it and then dedicating my life to it. There's another path here that I know, which is now saying, I love consumer tech. I love consumer hardware. I like things that people can hold and things that are designed. It doesn't have to be a crazy iPad with a million components. It could be a flashlight or electronics, a clock or a bike. And so the path is now I could consult for people building those types of companies or even partner with them to get them from 0 to 1 before they hire their team.
Any advice for marketers, product managers that are looking for a similar path, that are maybe just quitting? So like if you remember yourself, like post Michael Kors, maybe post Token, so thinking
Yeah.
of going independent, and they looking to bring their first customers and thinking about how to structure their life and how to do meaningful work. Like what we find is the challenge in those areas is that it's hard to have clear deliverables. When you do engineering, when you do maybe like the like that's much easier to quantify in some way. Marketing and product and growth sometimes a bit harder. Do you have any advice or structure to offer to people kind of in the same boat but just getting started on that path?
Yeah, two things on that. One, I was very lucky that over the 7 years of Michael Kors and being in New York and being obsessed with tech, I had actively built a network of startup founders, people that became venture capitalists, people that became advisors, people that worked at agencies. So when I made the move to this world, I knew enough people, a lot of people. Most people don't have that. And what's been starting, and this is a great segue for A teams, there are these incredible communities that have cropped up of people in the like-minded field of I've been doing this job my whole life. I've been in this velvet prison or this kind of proxy for, working towards a company mission, but now I don't know what to do next. I want to do something more entrepreneurial or something more freelance. So communities like A Team are amazing because you answered one question about how to structure your work, which again could be anywhere from a retainer for your time if you're unclear on deliverables, so you can get half my time for a month or my full time, or very specific scopes. It's an investor deck, it's a brand marketing pitch, it's this much code or this MVP. But that's just one of the many questions you have to ask yourself freelancing. The other is, how do I subcontract? How do I find partners? How do I find the right projects? How do I track my CRM for the potential clients or business development? How do I pay taxes? What do I expense? Where should I work? There's a million questions, and it's really, really hard to, like anything in life, to do it alone. So for me, even having the network I've had, joining communities like A Teams has been unbelievable because there's Zoom talks, there's meetups, there's Slack channels and groups dedicated to interests. People want to help other people. They want to collaborate with other people when it makes sense. There's hundreds of opportunities to do that, even if the one in front of you doesn't immediately work out. And so, yeah, that's my biggest piece of advice. Join a community. Even if you look at the Slack once or twice a day and you join an event once every few weeks, it'll help you think through things and definitely be a great resource.
I'm really glad that we took this time to get, we know each other for quite a while, but yet I've never taken the time to go to that level of depth. And I think I come away from this conversation um, with the inspiration of someone who is literally like going through every possible pain and challenges through some amazing opportunities as well to level up and get to independence of thinking, of decisions, of growth in every possible dimension. And I find that absolutely amazing. Like to me, the true freedom is not whether you're a freelancer or not, is when you get to decide what it is that you want to be independently from the main driver, which is typically validation and kind of the big name stuff. So that's just really inspiring just for me to hear that. Thank you for taking us down the memories and the experiences and the learnings that you've gathered along the years.
That's
Pretty
me.
amazing.
I learned, first of all, I learned way more from talking to you, and I've been talking this whole time. So you owe me an hour where I get to interview you and go deep
Anytime.
into your story and mindset so I can get inspired back.
Well, anytime.